Hello, I am Mudita, and welcome back to Satisfactory. This is episode 28 of the Load Balance playthrough, and today I'm going to tackle Fused Modular Frames, but 4 times more than the first time. I have all the alternate recipes. I'm going to utilize the heavy oil residue, diluted fuel, and the heat fused frames alt recipes. These are a great combination of recipes that are much more efficient than the default ones. I already have all of the heavy modular frames I'll need for this. If you'd like to see that video, the link will be in the description. I'll be using one of the impure nodes in the Spire Coast and using a train to bring the oil to the factory in the Dune Desert. With the nitrogen gas nearby, I'll be adding on to the heavy modular frame factory. I'm going to be using these nodes here. Let me try to quickly explain what's going on. As you can see, the first 2 inputs are gold, so we already have those. We just need to kind of plug them into the system. So I'll be bringing in 1,250 aluminum ingots. We're adding on to the heavy modular frame factory that we built in the last episode, so we'll be able to split off and plug in 25 heavy modular frames. I'll be bringing in the crude oil by train. I'll then be turning that into heavy oil residue, and then using the lake that I'm already using for the wet concrete, I'll be adding a few more water extractors so we can combine that with the heavy oil residue to make diluted fuel and with the nitrogen gas to make the nitric acid. I'll also need iron plates for that. I'll just need to use another iron node, but there's plenty in the desert to make those iron plates, and then we'll combine it all with 9 blenders to make 25 fused modular frames per minute. Now, let me run through the blueprints I'll be using. To start, I'll need my 4 smelter blueprint. Those ingots will lead into my 4 constructor blueprint. I'll then need 8 of this blueprint, which has the nitric acid already set. I need a total of 4 refineries making heavy oil residue, so I'll use 2 of this blueprint. I'll take that heavy oil residue, combine it with water in 3 of this blueprint. Last but not least, I'll need 9 of this blueprint, which will bring everything together and make the 25 fused modular frames. Now it's time to place those blueprints. So I am going to use this node right here, though I may switch it to that one because it's a little bit more out of the way. But this is going to be for the iron plates to help make the nitric acid, but it's honestly just 4 smelters and 4 constructors. So I'm not really going to focus on that. I will show it off before we get everything started though. So let's go over to this main platform and place some machines. Alright, so I went ahead and added the stripe, and since we're making fused modular frames, and those are orange and silver, make the stripe orange. I also went ahead and added 2 more because I know this isn't quite wide enough the way it was. Much like the towers, I am going to start at the end process and kind of work my way forwards to work out the spacing. So with the final product, we need 9 blenders making the fused modular frames. So I'm going to give myself 3 foundations because I think that's the minimum I've given myself for most of the other floors. And this isn't the only process. We're going to squeeze in everything onto this platform. Instead of doing multiple platforms, since I only need like 8 and 9 blenders, I think it just makes more sense to try to get them all on one floor. As far as the spacing that I'm going to go for, I am going to place each one so the middle, so we get the ladder lined up with the seam of the 2 foundations, and then we have just shy of 1 foundation as a gap in between them. So we need the middle one and then 4 on each side to get our 9. With those placed, let's move on to the nitric acid. So that I'm going to do on this side since the nitrogen is going to be coming from back there. Let's go ahead and I'm going to give it a gap of 4 to make sure I have enough room to do all of the pipe work here and then send it back out into the next process. So I think that should be enough space, and then we're actually going to keep the spacing the same there and all the way down. So I just need 8 of these. And blenders can be a little special. Sometimes you get this fun little dance. So if you go far enough away and come back, it seems to solve it, at least for me. So I knew I needed more space, but I guess I needed just a little bit more. I can't add a whole blueprint. I think this is about as close as I can get these two towers without them running into each other. But that gives me enough space, and it doesn't run into this tower. Alright, and then for this half, let's even it out by adding 2 more to this side. And on this side, we're going to deal with the fuel. So we're going to do it in the same line as those other second row blenders. Let's just nudge it into place. Perfect. So we've got a gap 1, 2, 3, 4. And same spacing there. Perfect. So with these, I actually only need 3 of them. To get those to work, I'm going to need that heavy oil residue. So I just need 2 of this blueprint. Alright, so I'm just going to give it a gap of 2, just because I've got plenty of space. And then we're going to give this a gap of 2. Alright, so last few machines we need are some packagers, but I'm out of rubber, so let me go grab that. Now I've got rubber, so I can place these packagers. So I'm going to use it for the water for both the fuel and for the nitric acid. I'm also going to place 2 back here because we are going to ship in the crude oil. The original plan was to make the fuel and everything out there because you've got the water, the crude oil. I could just make a small little thing there and send it over here and do the same thing, but with packaged fuel. Packaged fuel comes in, empty canisters go out, and then the train completes the loop. But then when I got thinking about it, it just made more sense just to send the crude oil because shipping that was going to be much more convenient. I only need 93.75 crude oil per minute. But when this is done, these 3 are going to be making 250 fuel per minute. So that's why I'm bringing in just the crude oil and not the fuel. And then this one is going to go, I believe it's right here. May have to move it over just slightly, but I think that should be the spot. So that one there, and then this one in the same spot on this side. These 2 will be unpackaging the water. And I believe besides the iron tower, that's all the machines placed. So now, just got to do a little build work. So we'll just start at this end since we're already over here. And let's figure out how this is going to work. So let's go ahead and place a merger here. Splitter here. And the reason for it is now I'm going to place 3 floor holes. So the nitric acid needs nitrogen gas, water, and iron plates. The total amount of iron plates is 66.66 and the total water is 200. So we're going to go ahead and grab our Mark III. So this is going to be packaged water in. This is going to be empty canisters out. So if we're bringing in 200, that means 100 is going here. 100 is going here. So Mark II for all of these. Alright, let's go ahead and load balance all of these iron plates. So for the iron plates, it's pretty much Mark I for everything except for the very first belt. So this right here, this is Mark II, This is our 66 2/3. And everything else is Mark 1. So like with a bunch of the other ones, the inputs are just going to have the logistics down below. We'll figure that out in a little bit, but let's finish up the pipes. So I'm going to go ahead and change my color ahead of time so I don't have to repaint them all. And let's work on the nitrogen first. Ooh. Oh, well, I guess that wasn't the right spot. I really thought it was. There we go. And that's why you check it first before you place it all. In total, I need 800 nitrogen gas, so I'm going to be bringing in 2 Mark II pipes. So I changed them all to Mark II real quickly. And now we just need to find, I believe it's the center line here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the floor hole and bring up the nitrogen from below right here. And just going to do the same thing on this side. Terrific. So with the water, same thing. We're going to be doing 2 different pipes inputting these, but I can leave it all as Mark 1. So let's go ahead and switch our color. And now I'm going to go ahead and start using a few temporary foundations. So I'm going to need one there and probably one there. Alright, so I just want this one on this side of the foundation, right on top of that pipe. Oops, I put this on the wrong side. This was supposed to be on that side. The water is supposed to go on this side. Okay, so now we can get back to what we're doing. So the water is on this side. Just because that's how the inputs go, so it's just going to keep everything a little bit, just a little bit more symmetrical. Have the distance be a little bit more similar. And there we go. So now we can delete our temporary foundations. And that's the nitric acid. Oh, almost done. One more pipe. And there we go. Perfect. So now we just need to worry about the outputs. Now, this is where I have learned, well, I take it back. I don't know if I've really learned anything, but I have made some improvements on how I originally was going to lay this out. So I know the spacing basically starts with the pipe running down the middle, oddly enough. So let's see. And then with these, we've got 8. So it's going to go 1, 2, 3. This is 200 nitric acid, so totally fine with Mark 1. Let's see, so this one is going to go in the middle of 3. These 4. And so this one is going to be 1, 2, 3, right here. Alright, and just do the same thing on this side. Originally, this is how I had this piped up. And it did work, and I think if I gave it enough time, it would have just sorted itself out. The issue that I have found in doing anything this size or bigger, whenever it almost doesn't matter if it's merging or splitting up the pipes. As soon as I have this many, it's where I start to have issues. And the issue would be that since I like to let all of the fluids back up, these would all have a full internal storage of 50. As soon as they lose enough of it, they'll turn back on. And because they all have this pretty large buffer, it was just taking a really long time for all of them to lose enough of it. Some of them would end up losing it because the fluids don't empty equally from each of them, and I have no idea of which one's going to empty and which one isn't. What I found is that I'm sure you could probably use valves, and I'm sure some people are going to yell at their screen saying, why don't you just use valves? It's really dumb the way you're doing it. And you may be right. I just haven't had the best luck with valves so far, in that because for them to normally operate, this is my understanding, so please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But my understanding is if I want the valve at 100%, it should more or less, it should just essentially act like it's not there except for preventing backflow. But as soon as you start limiting the flow, if I wanted to cut this in half and get, 150, the pipe actually needs to be completely full. This pipe would need to be 100% full for it to get 150. Up until then, if there's only 200 in the pipe, it's not going to limit it to 150. It's actually going to limit it to 100 because it's going to do it in like half. And maybe that's completely unrelated, but I just have a feeling that putting those on the output, that is where sometimes the issue rises, and I'll end up having the same sort of problem where one machine will start backing up, whereas the other one will just keep flowing. And then this one will run at like 95%. Is it the end of the world or the biggest deal? No, not at all. But does it drive me nuts seeing the little divots in my power graph? Yes, it absolutely does. So this was my workaround. What I have found, much like with some of my oil setups, when I'm merging pipes together, I'll often use a Mark I pump instead of the valve. To me, the 4 megawatts of power is absolutely worth it. So basically, after the first 2 pipes, I'm going to put a pump. And then what I want to do is at the very end, I'm also going to put one more. Is it overkill? I'm sure it is. But I can tell you it does work. And sometimes, depending on how much time you've spent troubleshooting it, that's all that really matters. So is it overkill? Quite possibly. But at the cost of 20 megawatts to make this just work, 100% worth it in my opinion. So the other tricky part to this is the pipe is going to raise. One of the two needed to raise, and I just decided to do the nitric acid instead of the fuel because there was less of it. Not really sure if that was the right reason, and maybe I should have switched it and I wouldn't have had the same issues, but that's what we're going with, and it will work. Alright, starting with the packagers, can do the same setup here. So I'm going to have the empty canisters merge into the middle here. So with these, we're dealing with the crude oil instead of the water. So we need Mark II for our 93 3/4, which means Mark I is going to be fine for both of these. I think we can get this slightly more accurate, so let's try. So 93.75 divided by 2 divided by the default rate of 60, multiply it by 100 to get the percentage, and there we go. So that's the right number that we're looking for. Perfect. Let's go ahead and switch our pipes to black. We can change these all to Mark 1. And then, let's see, let's find, nice thing with nudge is you can find that exact spot of that shortest distance really easy. Let's get it to the right height and then just nudge out until it's blue. And there you go. And then we can go ahead and just get rid of these. Terrific. Okay, so that's the crude oil. In total, I need 125 heavy oil residue. We're going to use 4 machines, so 31 1/4 each. Let's deal with the output of the heavy oil residue. So switch our pipes to that color. Alright, that's the heavy oil residue, so let's do the water. Gonna go ahead and grab temporary foundation. Do you know what, we'll just stagger the pipes. Why not? Just give it a fun look. Let's make sure we change the color though, so I don't mix them up. Yeah, we'll just delete these real quick and connect that to there. And then with this one, since we're just going to be using one packager, because the rates at which they package and unpackage are different. So packaging, they only do 60 a minute by default, but unpackaging, it's double that, which means if I throw a whole bunch in here, I could have one packager unpackage 250 a minute, no problem. So I don't normally use my power shards on the regular machines. I usually use them for mining, oil, water extractors, and then the power generation. But every once in a while, it's just really convenient to just be able to use one machine like this, and instead of the normal 10, it's going to use like well over 208, probably closer to like 26, 27 megawatts. So if I needed a whole bunch of those, the cost in power may add up and not make it worth it, but every once in a while in those single case uses, it's super handy. Alright, so let's go ahead and change our pipe to good old Fix-It Primary Orange, because that's pretty much the color of the fuel. And yeah, we'll come up to there. So let's join up all 3 of these. So in total, we've got 250 fuel. So what I realized is I placed all the exact same one, but in my other playlist that I have going on, I made some changes to my blueprint, and sometimes I forget to bring those changes back over to this world. So I made a second blueprint. Let's make sure it's all lined up right. Yep. That has the inputs already included, which should make things a little bit easier. It's just obviously going to be colored the wrong things. The other thing I have learned is when you're switching blueprints from one save to another, it keeps what swatch number it is, but not any of the details of what that swatch was. So in the other playthrough, I'm using a different save file, and so in swatch 4, it was white or black or something like that. It's just kind of a more generic color, but when it comes over here, now it's using this one, which I just think is funny. So if you're ever wondering why when you move blueprints around, things are just weirdly colored, it's because it's keeping which swatch number it is, not the actual color code or whatever it's called. And then I'm just gonna need to copy and paste, but I just need to do that 3 times. So I've got 9 blenders here. So doing these in 3s is gonna be obviously the easiest way to do it. So if you're at all curious about how I make the blueprints or if they're available to download, I have a different playlist on the same channel that's going through the different blueprints I'm using for each of the different kind of categories of machines. So eventually I'll work my way through all the different blueprints I can think of to share. And the ones that I've done videos for are all on Google Drive. And I'll go ahead and make sure I put that link in the description. Alright, so that's fuel. So we're just going to kind of work our way up. Let's make sure we change color again. Because I'm just going to delete those since that one is clipping straight through this pipe. And I didn't place it in the right place anyway, so that's okay. Yeah, it should go there. Okay, perfect. This one's actually got a little bit more space, so we'll space these out a little bit different. Why not? I can spice it up a little bit. That is the nitric acid loaded. So now we just have the solids, which are always going to be a little bit easier. So as far as the solids go, we've got the heavy modular frames and the aluminum ingots. So for no particular reason, I am going to put the heavy modular frames on the top one and the ingots as the second one, just because the heavy modular frames are slower, so they'll just kind of cruise on top, whereas the aluminum ingots are just going to be zipping by. The total amounts that we need for these two are 25 heavy modular frames and 1,250 aluminum ingots. So a little bit of a difference there. So we've got 1388.88 repeating. So that's going to be Mark III. And let's just see, what is our... We'll just make black our default here. Alright, so let's also make sure, actually go around and change all of these lifts to Mark III before I forget. And while we're at it, we can just go ahead and do the Mark I. So we're going to give these a nice long entrance here. So we're going to put these, let's see, this is going to be the blueprint. My wall with the sign there is going to take up basically that whole thing. So just to give myself enough space, let's just put it the top of this foundation. So those are going to be the two solids, but actually the heavy modular frames can load balance across all 9. However, since I need 1250, we're going to do that with 3 groups of 3. So I need to plug in 4/16 and 2/3 into each one of these. So we're just going to leave that one separate. So this is going to get its own. So we'll just have it come in the same line. There we go. So that's going to be the same thing with this one. 2, 3, 4. And same with this one. Normally, 4/16 and 2/3 is not a number I would try to load balance. However, since it's 3 groups of 3, it's pretty easy. I'm going to be bringing in the 1250 is not too difficult of a number to load balance. And then I'll have that along 2 belts coming from the train station over here. From that, I'm just going to use a load balancer to take it from 2 belts to 3. So I don't actually have to worry about the exact amount. And there we go. So that's the basics. So really not too difficult of a factory to do the belt and pipe work for. So let me do the last couple things. I'm going to figure out the power. I'll probably do a very similar thing to that to distribute the power across here. And then set up the awesome sink for the final product. Get some walls here on the side. Set up some buses. I'll get that all set up. And I'll give you the quick tour before we get this thing started. I have to say, the desert is shaping up quite nicely. Let's go take a look at everything. Here we are at the little tower that's dealing with our iron plates. So we've got the miner, it's outputting 100 iron ore. We've got 4 smelters, and then on top of that, 4 constructors. So real simple. You just got the hyper tube running right next to it. And then we've got the finished product coming out, headed straight into the factory there. Let me show you these over here. Okay, so we're over here at the wet concrete, and since we've got the lake right here, I decided to just add on. These 9 are already fully overclocked to 300. These 2 are overclocked, but not quite as much. So this one is overclocked to 200. This one is overclocked to 250, and all of the packagers are underclocked to 50 per minute. The 200 water is going to the nitric acid, whereas the 250 is going towards the fuel. And we've got the packagers loaded up, and the other empty belts are going to be where the package water goes. Back up here at the top of the platform, let's take a look at underneath. So this is where I'm going to delete the sink and plug in the heavy modular frames when it's time. Since this is another project where it takes a couple steps, since I'm adding on to an existing factory instead of just building its own where I flip the switch and everything turns on, I want this to all be on one power grid. So when it comes time, I'm just going to connect this wire, and that'll connect the power to the entire floor. I did go ahead and turn on the resource well pressurizer and let the pipes fill up with the nitrogen gas, so that's already here. I'm still going to be adding on more because I'm going to be making pressure conversion cubes, so I didn't add the walls to the back because I just have to delete them. I learned that lesson with the first part. And this is where the aluminum ingots are coming in, and right now they're just being sent to Awesome Sync, so I'll delete those and connect them to the factory when it's time. Those will be the last things to go because they're coming in at such a high rate, the machines would back up super quickly. So this will be the last thing to get plugged in to really get everything going. And this is my 2 to 3 belt load balancer, so it's actually just a blueprint, pretty simple. So you can just plug in 2 belts and 3 are going to come out equally balanced. So the way it works you just split each belt into 3, and then with a merger, each merger gets 1 from each of these splits. And that's how we get the 3 even belts for our 3 splits for the final blenders. Now it's time to turn it on, and to do that, we're going to head back to the train station. Here we are back at the train station, and I've got my train ready to go. So I set it up down here because this is my personal train station, and so it taking up this section doesn't interfere with anything. So let me explain kind of how this works. We've got 2 locomotives because in total this is 5, which I can't remember if it's 5 or if it's only 4 that needs a second one. So either way, because it needed to take up that freight platform, if this wasn't a locomotive, it would have needed to be an extra freight platform, and then that would have been a lot for just 1 locomotive. So that's why there's 2. The first 3 I don't actually need. I only need these last 2. One is going to be bringing in the packaged crude oil, whereas the second one is going to be taking back the empty canisters. So to avoid accidentally picking up something or dropping off something that I don't want, what I do is I'll fill it up with something that I know this train and these train stations are never going to deal with, and copper ore was an easy one that's around here. So now if I jump in the train and we bring up the timetable, go to edit timetable, this is why. So at this train station, we're only going to be loading empty canisters and dropping off packaged oil. And if we look at the Spire Coast, we're only going to be picking up packaged oil and dropping off empty canisters. So at neither of the points will it be able to drop off the copper ore. It's just another good way that you can avoid accidentally picking up something that it's not supposed to. So I'm going to speed up the train trip, but we're going to go ahead and get this started, and I'll show you what it looks like over at the Spire Coast. And here we are. I forgot about the little detour in the beginning, so I actually had empty canisters that it was going to bring here, and it is bringing a load of packaged fuel back to the factory. But let me show you where that's coming from. So these empty canisters are going to come along this belt here, snake around, all the way to back here. So I only needed an impure node, and that's why I'm not using this normal one. So the oil extractor is clocked to 93.75, so each packager is only clocked to 31.25. Instead of using 4 packagers like I normally would have and underclock them, I used 3 power shards to each get them to 31.25, as that was just a much more round number, if you could call it that, than having a crazy repeating decimal point. So I'm at the point in the game where I've got plenty of power shards, so the extra tiny bit of power usage, 0.6, for the convenience is worth it. And here we can see the empty packages make their way over to the packagers. Let's go inside and let me show you how I load balance it. So 93.75 does sound like an awful number, but it's actually 1/8 of 750. So load balancing it, as it looks a little crazy, really isn't that bad. So we've got 780 coming out of here. I took a Mark 1 belt, so we're siphoning off 60, and then we're going to loop back 30, and then the other 30 is going to get merged with everything else going back. So after that point right here, we've got our 750, so then it's just getting it down to 1/8. So this is half, this is a quarter, and this is our 1/8. And then we're just looping everything back into the storage container. And I'm doing this pretty much this exact same thing on the other side to load balance the packaged oil. So let's head on back to the main factory. Terrific. We're just in time to see the crude oil making it off the train, heading its way into the factory. Since it's got a little bit of a ways to go, I'm going to wait till it's a little bit closer, and then we'll start powering everything on. Now that the crude oil is pretty close to being in the factory, it's still got a ways to go to make it to those refineries. In hindsight, I probably should have switched these two things around. I just figured having the nitric acid closer to the nitrogen just made sense, but in reality, having the crude oil go less far would have made more sense because nitrogen just flows. It's just one of the easiest resources in the game to work with. But that's okay, it'll still work, it just takes a little bit longer. But at this point, I think we're doing some of these things are obviously more for looks than for the speed, but I do like keeping the stopwatch going. It's been a fun thing I've been doing for these videos, so we're just gonna keep with it. So let's get it started. So let's go ahead and we're gonna power on the iron plates. Now we're gonna go power on the water extractors, and then I'm gonna run inside, power on that whole floor, and then we'll run around and watch it all come to life. And now that we're starting to back up with both the nitric acid and I think even those refineries, yep, the heavy oil residue is shut off because that's backed up. So we're about to start backing up on the crude oil. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this sink. Get the heavy modular frames flowing into the factory. Now that the machines have some heavy modular frames and everything else, we can go downstairs and get the aluminum ingots plugged in. And there we go. I think they just needed to turn off and on once, and they should be able to stay on now. That is 25 fused modular frames per minute done. And that is mission complete. So it will take quite a while to get everything on at 100%. Since liquids don't exit the machines quite evenly, even with the pumps, it'll take a while for at least like one of the pairs to empty, and then both of them should be able to stay on. This project is coming along quite nicely. So to finish off this desert area, the next project will be making pressure conversion cubes at a rate of 15 per minute. So look forward to that, and thanks for watching.